Hello, YouTube, and welcome back to another book review from me, your host, Logan Albright. We're back to book reviews after a couple weeks of literature hauls and DVD hauls and stuff like that. I have finished my kind of goal of book reading for the year. I always set a goal on Goodreads of how many books I want to read for the year, and I've already finished it. So I've gotten a little bit lazy about my reading in the last couple months of the year. But I did just finish a novel, which I really loved, and I wanted to share it with you all. As you know, if you've been watching my channel, I am a big fan of Anthony Burgess. I discovered him, I don't know, about a year ago maybe. I already knew about A Clockwork Orange, obviously, but I discovered his other work about a year ago, and since then I've been sort of devouring as much of his work as I can get my hands on. He wrote like 35 novels, and he's only known for A Clockwork Orange, so I'm trying to evangelize him to people because I think he's a wonderful writer, and it's a shame that people don't know his other work. I found this book, Honey for the Bears, in a used bookstore here in Washington, D.C., and I bought it because I'd heard of it and I wanted to read it. I believe this to be a first edition. It appears to be a first edition as far as I can tell. I didn't know that at the time I bought it. I just kind of picked it up without really looking at it much, and I ended up paying more for it than I wanted to, but not too much more. I was happy to pay it because it's a really good book. It came out in 1963, which is the year after A Clockwork Orange, and it is basically a satire looking at the Soviet Union and England's relations to each other. The story, in brief, is a man named Paul and his wife Belinda are English subjects. Belinda is actually American, but she's married to Paul, who's English. They are going over to Russia, to the Soviet Union, to try to sell some polyester dresses. They have a friend whose name is Robert, who has recently died, and he was sort of a black market importer to the Soviet Union to get them capitalist goods, but he has left a widow behind, and in order to try to provide for his widow, they've agreed to try to sell these polyester dresses in the Soviet Union, which is very illegal, to try to raise some money to support her. That's the plan. Needless to say, the plan does not go as intended. Pretty much everything that can go wrong does go wrong, and it's a little bit of a comedy of errors in this two foreigners trying to understand the Russian society and the system and trying not to get caught by the Soviet police and a bunch of other things like that. Belinda immediately gets sick. She gets a rash on her neck and has all kinds of other problems with her, and she spends the entire time in the hospital whining and complaining. I found her very unpleasant. Paul is kind of helplessly floundering about trying to sell these dresses and trying to figure out what's going on and trying to avoid being caught by the authorities. Paul is a very typical Englishman. He is very self-important, and he has this kind of aggrieved attitude of like, how dare you treat me this way? I'm an Englishman. By God, you must treat me with respect. And he's not very good at subterfuge, and he's not very good about being sneaky or being deferential. He seems to have this kind of entitled feeling that because he's English, everyone should just do what he says, which has its own sort of charm. I'm a big Anglophobe, and not Anglophobe, Anglophile, and I like that sort of thing. So I found him to be a kind of funny character, not exactly a likable character, but a funny character. And the whole story is kind of a clash of cultures between what the British consider to be proper and what the Soviets consider to be proper, and there's a language barrier that is run up against. Burgess was a great fan of language, and he was also a great fan of music, being a composer himself as well as a novelist. So there's a lot of use of language and a lot of use of music in this book, which I love both of those things, so it's a delight to me. I studied Russian in college, so I know a little Russian, and the use of the Russian phrases in the book, which are, I would say they're not an impediment to people reading the book if they don't know any Russian, because they're mostly translated, but I found I got a little bit more enjoyment out of it than I might otherwise have because I know what these phrases mean. And I think I have a little bit more of a frame of reference of what the Soviet Union was like than a lot of people, because I studied not only just the Russian language, but Russian history and Russian literature and Russian culture in college. So I really got a kick out of that, and I liked it. And I think that's maybe why I responded more positively to this book than a lot of people did. I was looking at the reviews on Goodreads, and it's pretty negatively reviewed compared to his other books. Got quite a few one-star reviews and two-star reviews, which surprised me because I found the book to be an absolute delight. I wouldn't call it like hilarious. A lot of literary types will kind of rank these very dry satires and say it's a uproarious satire, it's so funny. I wouldn't say it's laugh out loud funny, but it certainly is amusing. It's got a little bit of that kind of screwball slapstick kind of comedy in it, in the sense that it's just one calamity after another where things keep going wrong for our poor protagonist and his efforts, his ostensibly well-meaning efforts to try to help his friend back home and his friend's widow. So it's kind of funny. It's not really laugh out loud funny, but it's amusing. And I found the exploration of the two different cultures and the languages and the music and all that kind of stuff completely delightful and lovely. And just the prose is so good. That's one of the things I love about Burgess. It doesn't really matter what he's writing about. It's his prose is so beautiful. I want to read to you a sentence from the first page of the first chapter that I just like. I was reading page 1 and I thought, already I'm going to love this book because this sentence is so good. And there's comparably great sentences on pretty much every page, but this one really stood out to me. Paul's on the ship listening to a concert of music, and let's see if I can find it here. Here it is. The music, after its climax of shocking brass, settled to vapid, rocking, waltzing, fluting. Those like 3 ings in a row there, and then the ending the sentence a little bit abruptly, a little bit sooner than you expected to. I just found that kind of thing delightful. It's a little bit experimental, it's a little bit unusual, and it's just fun. And there's like those kind of beautiful sentences on every page. His prose is just so inspired and so good that it doesn't really matter what he's writing about. But I think that the reason I may have enjoyed the book more than the Goodreads reviewers is because I have a little bit more context for what Russia was like and the Russian language and Russian culture and all that kind of thing. So I don't know, but I really loved it. If you are interested in these topics, I would very much recommend that you read it. If you are interested in Anthony Burgess in general, I would recommend that you read it. At some point, I want to read pretty much everything that he's written. A lot of it is out of print, but I'm going to go through and try to get my hands on all of it. And at that point, I'll probably do a ranking of my favorite books of his. But this one was a real treat, and it's not very long. It's about 250 pages. Got through it pretty quickly and had a lot of fun with it. So I know I've done a few Anthony Burgess reviews on this channel, and I think people have enjoyed them for the most part. So hopefully this will give you another one to look into if you are a fan of his writing. Honey for the Bears, 1963, about this whole, Soviet English thing going on. One thing I will say about it is it's not as critical of the Soviet Union as you might expect from a capitalist economy. That certainly doesn't paint it to be the best place in the world. I wouldn't call it like a communist propaganda piece or anything like that. But I think he deals fairly with the subject in the sense that, he represents the people not as authoritarian monsters. He represents them not as mindless, worker bees in a communist hive. He represents them as human beings and as people, and their system has its problems and our system has its problems. I'm, pretty anti-communist myself, but I was happy to see not a propaganda piece, but kind of a fair treatment of the two different economic systems. And there's a little bit of dialogue back and forth between Paul, who's more of the capitalist. He runs an antique store back in his own town, his own country in London, and the communist who he runs up against, who thinks that having private ownership is incredibly stupid. Why would anyone want to do that? Having that clash of cultures is a lot of fun to read about. So I really loved it. I gave it 5 stars on Goodreads. I've given most of Burgess's books that I've read 5 stars. I just think he's delightful. And if you are like me and think he's delightful, I would recommend Honey for the Bears. If you are also a fan of Burgess, I'd be interested to know where I should go next. I want to get more of his books and read them. If you have any particular favorites, please leave them down in the comments and let me know. If not, please like the video and subscribe to the channel and click the bell for notifications. And be sure to check back next week. I try to upload every Wednesday with a fresh book review, and I should have something new for you next week as well. So until that time, I have been your host, Logan Albright. It's been a pleasure talking with you, and I'll catch you later.